presentation. My name is Ron DeHaas. I'm the president of Covenant Eyes, and I would like to just simply start out by asking you all to stand up. Is my PowerPoint up? Yeah. Does this clicker work? It does? I'll try it. You have to turn it on. Stand up, and what I want you to do is lift your hands in the air. I'm going to have to put my microphone down. I'll say it on the microphone. Jerry Kirk, thank you for bringing this all together. This has been a wonderful conference. Yeah, please be seated. And I believe that we really need to be all together just like we were clapping just now. The first time, we didn't do so good. When I said, do it on the count of three, everybody was in sync. And then the second time I said that, we all nailed it. And just like that, we're all together in this room. For the first time, we have so many resources coming together in an amazing way. And I thank Jerry Kirk for that. And I hope that this is just the first of an annual Convergence convention, because that was convergence, wasn't it? So thank you, Jerry. Jerry, you said something else this morning about the fact that when we first entered into this fight, and as we continue this fight, it did require and it will require extraordinary sacrifice. And I want to just start off with an example of extraordinary sacrifice that I think you can relate to. Imagine yourself just walking along a river, and as you're walking along the river, you all of a sudden you hear someone scream. And you see in the river that someone is drowning. What would you do? Keeping in mind the idea of extraordinary sacrifice, what would you do? Well, you're going to jump into the river, and you're going to pull that person out, and you're going to draw them up to the shoreline, and you're going to give them artificial resuscitation, and you're going to try to revive them. And finally, that person starts breathing again, and you've saved that person, and you're really excited because you saved that person, but no sooner does that person start breathing again than you hear another cry for help, and you look out on the river, and there are two more, not just one, but two, and they're both drowning, and you think, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to go in and get at least one, and so you drag one up on the surface, and you give that person resuscitation, and you get that person breathing, and you think, oh, and then you look out and you see the other person's still thrashing around, I can save him, and you jump in and you pull him up and you save him, and the same thing, give him artificial respiration, and he starts breathing again. And isn't it just like this hectic world that when those two start breathing, we hear yet another cry for help. And we look out in the river, and there aren't two. Now there are four. And I think, oh my, what am I going to do now? I guess I'll have to hire somebody. Well, I'm missing the point. Because if I had only looked up the river a quarter mile, I would find that somebody is up there pushing people into the river. Wouldn't it be a lot better if I had just simply gone a quarter mile up the river and stopped that person from pushing them in? Oh, okay. If I had gone up and stopped that person, I would have been a lot further ahead. And there have been three threads that I have heard going through this conference, and one of them is the fact that we need to be more proactive. Now, none of us, I think for a level of commitment, you can't get a higher level of commitment than all the people who are in this room. But we have to admit that we're not perfect. None of us is perfect at being proactive. We could all do better, couldn't we? Well, 11 years ago, I decided that I needed to make the sacrifice, and my wife will attest, and Lynn McClurg over here, our vice president of Covenant Eyes, will also attest because he made a similar sacrifice, basically giving up everything to go to work in this business of internet safety. Covenant Eyes started 11 years ago, and over that 11 years, we really have changed hundreds of thousands of people's lives. If you don't know about Covenant Eyes, stop by our booth and I'll tell you. We're recommended by a number of organizations, as was already said, Pure Hope, Enough is Enough, and many other organizations. But one of the things that we really wanted to do was to be proactive. From the very beginning, 11 years ago, I wanted to be proactive. And I realized there are two things that I can do in the area of being proactive. And those two things also are threads that I've heard in this conference. Just about every talk has brought these two threads to the fore. And that is, number one, there's a lack of knowledge in the general populace of the people, especially older people. The older you get, the worse we're educated. And then the second thread is the fact that the internet is breeding false relationships. And those false relationships are a direct result of the false relationships that are developed on the internet. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to personalize a story so that you can kind of think along with me to understand these two different threads, the thread of the lack of knowledge and false relationships. How many here have a teenage daughter? I do. Or have at one time had a teenage daughter. Yeah, more than half. Well, I'm going to ask you to imagine along with me, and even if you haven't had a teenage daughter, imagine along with me. Just imagine that you have a teenage daughter, and you have a wonderful family, and you decide you haven't heard, your daughter's up in her bedroom, and you haven't heard from her for a while, so you're just going to pop in and see what she's up to. So you open the door, and to your horror, what you find is your daughter is posing in front of her computer, nude from the waist up, camera on a site called stickem.com. If you're not familiar with that site, check it out. It's an interesting site. And now you might be saying to yourself, well, that would never happen in my family. Number one, I know my daughter well enough. My daughter would never do that. And number two, we have a filter on our computers, and she couldn't even get to stickem.com because it would be filtered. Well, how many of you know that a filter on your computer is sort of like, instead of diving in and saving that person drowning, just throwing a life preserver in and hoping that they grab onto it? So I asked my daughter, I'm outraged, and I say to my daughter, how on earth did you get to this site? We have a filter on our computer. And my daughter says, well, Dad, I use the same site, I use the same thing that everybody uses. This is the most common way of getting around filters, and they're secure anonymizers. Many of you may know what an anonymizer is, but our survey would show that 70% of you do not know what a secure anonymizer is, and it is the most common way of getting around every filter. If you haven't guessed, Covenant Eyes does block secure anonymizers, but most filters do not block this. And this is the way that kids get around it, is these secure anonymizers. You just type in playboy.com in this white box, and playboy.com comes up on your screen. And it's as easy as that, whether you have a filter or not. Well, the statistics are pretty shocking. You think, well, I know my daughter well enough. Well, it turns out that 20% of teenagers, and it's even higher for girls, it's actually 22% of girls, teen girls, practice sexting. And for young adults, it's 1/3. 1/3 of young adults have sent sexting messages, which is pretty amazing. And the worst of it all, and we've heard this from a number of speakers, the worst of it all is that my daughter thinks that it's okay, what she's doing. She actually thinks it's okay. And I talk to her and I say, how can you possibly think this is okay? Well, Dad, we never talked about it. You never told me it was wrong. You know, actually 33% of children 8 to 18 have a computer in they have the internet on a computer in their bedrooms. And 34% of all children have never had one single word of instruction on how to use the internet. 34%. It's an amazing statistic. Well, it doesn't affect just kids. It affects all relationships. And as you can see, and this is a pretty well-established statistic, 56% of divorces, 56% of divorces result from one or the other spouse having an obsessive use of internet pornography. A phenomenal statistic. And I'll tell you what, that 56% is of people who are old enough to be married and divorced. What about the young guys who are in college? 87% of them use internet pornography regularly, and it's actually upwards of 87%. And more, they do not think it is wrong. Is Isaac here? Where's Isaac? I was sitting next to Isaac up in the corner there at dinner. He told me this story. He walks into his room was it a seminary? A Bible college. Walks into his room at a Bible college, and here's his roommate chatting with his roommate's girlfriend. His roommate's girlfriend is sitting there in her underwear. And all their friends are sitting around. All the guy's friends are sitting around, and poor Isaac walks in and sees this. And they don't even think it's wrong anymore. And so we are left with a culture that is probably, we're facing the tip of the iceberg, especially when we recognize that the age group with the greatest use of pornography is the ages 12 to 17. So, how do we look upstream? How do we head this off at the pass? How can we be proactive? We've heard over and over again, the number one way is knowledge. And I want to give you some action items. I don't want you to walk out of here just with the warm fuzzies we all got together. I want to give you some action items. Number one, arm yourself with information. We have an unbelievable gathering of resources here in this building right at this moment. And you need to take advantage of those resources. You need to write down every single website. You need to go get a card from every table, every exhibitor's table. You need to talk to the exhibitors. And especially learn about these secure anonymizers. Learn what social networking is doing. You, of all people, you need to know what the resources are. If you don't know it, how can you possibly expect the parents whom you mentor to know? The second point, take advantage of those knowledge resources. You need to actually read them. We have tremendous resources here. Take advantage of them. The third action item, I want to challenge everyone in this room to actually have a line item on your budget next year for education of those whom you mentor and your staff. The education. Because accountability, after all, is the only way that we really follow through if there really is genuine accountability. And so if you put a line item on your budget and at the end of the year you've only spent 1/3 of it, then you can look back and say, well, I guess we're not really living up to what we thought we would do. The next point, avoid liability for your organization by having an annual internet assessment of your organization's internet system, the computers, and also have an effective, a solid, and well-known and enforced internet use policy. If you don't have an effective and a well-known and an enforced internet use policy, please see me. I would gladly, we at Covenant Eyes have spent thousands of dollars on developing an effective and enforced and well-known internet use policy for our organization. And I would be glad to share that with you. Of course, you can't use it verbatim, but I'd be happy to offer that to you to copy and paste whatever portions your attorneys would feel would be appropriate for your organization. And finally, let people know where you stand. If you have your packets with you, your registration materials, there's a blue book in there that Covenant Eyes put in your packet. And inside that folder is a sheet that looks like this. And we have these up at our booth, too, right across the hall. Covenant Eyes rates every website. We rate them with E for everyone, Y for youth, T for teen, MT for mature teen, M for mature, and HM for highly mature. Highly mature is a bit of a misnomer because that includes the really bad stuff. But these are the ratings, and what I would encourage you to do is, this is an independent rating system to have your website rated for its content, and then you can actually put one of these seals, just like the Good Housekeeping seal, actually put one of these seals directly embedded on your website, just like a VeriSign seal. And then the next thing that helps us to look upstream is relationships. What can we do in the area of relationships? And I want to look at a few action items on that. Number one, this is so important, is to set the example ourselves. If we don't do it, how can we expect those whom we mentor to do it? Set the example for accountability. Put into place a system of accountability that monitors laptops and mobile devices, monitors every computer in your system, in your network, even when they're off-site, so that you can maintain accountability of those computers at all times. The second point, make sure that you get an easy-to-use accountability report. If you can't use the accountability report, then it really isn't accountability, is it? You have to be able to use it. And so get an easy-to-use accountability report that reports everything, even those secure anonymizers. And if you haven't figured it out, I believe Covenant Eyes is probably the only service that reports those secure anonymizers, by the way. Third point, provide training for your staff. So many organizations don't do this. Are you ready if somebody in your employ accesses inappropriate material? What are you going to do? What's your response? What's your organization's response? Is your staff trained to handle that? Are there even HIPAA violations if the person's an addict? And then finally, teach accountability relationships to everybody whom you mentor. That's not just the staff that you work with. It's all the people that you mentor. Teach those accountability relationships. Okay, there's one more action item that I want to offer you. And that action item is another item, and I have, how many of you do not have, if you do not have this blue booklet from your registration pack, would you raise your hands and we'll pass out one page from it. Can we have Jeannie and Patty, maybe you can help pass those out, get them out. There's a page in that folder that looks like this, and it is a panel appraisal. And I would ask, and I'm talking about this panel, the speakers that you have in front of you here, if you could do a panel appraisal, and as a personal favor to me, if you would fill that out, I would very much appreciate it. And here's one more question that I have in terms of commitment. If I've got an iPad here, maybe I better wait until people are done passing. If I've got an iPad here, who in this room would like to have this iPad for free? Is there anyone who does not want this iPad for free? I wouldn't know how to use it, honestly. I probably could figure it out, though. We're giving away this iPad for free. And as a thank you for filling out this survey that's being passed out right now, if you fill out this survey, drop it off at the Covenant Eyes booth, or if you fill it out right now, get it to me. We will indeed have a drawing tomorrow for that iPad, and we're going to give it to somebody in this room. And so that is, what's that? It works for me, too. I guess I'll fill one out, too. You can't be a Covenant Eyes employee, by the way, for those of you who are up there. So, okay, I think we do have time for maybe one question. So if there's somebody that has a question for Patrick Truman or myself, Does anyone have a question? Yes.
I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and we've fought it for years, but now, unfortunately, legalized gambling is coming right to the city. It's just unbelievable that the sheriff and the police department were 100% in favor of this happening. Isn't it indeed that legalized gambling casinos bring prostitution in that direction? Is that a true statement or not?
Well, I'm probably not the best one to answer that for you. Maybe someone else has an opinion. Sexually oriented businesses always have prostitution associated with them. I don't know about gambling. I mean, if you look at Las Vegas, et cetera, it's always there. But I don't, I'm probably not the best one on that. There we go. Richard Land.
When a casino comes in, every major crime except homicide goes up by 15% within 5 years, including prostitution, embezzlement, theft, etc.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb.